Hi everybody, welcome to Line of the Week number 159, Motif Development Using Melodic Rhythms. It's time again to take another rhythm, add notes to it, and then improvise with it over tunes. This is called Motif Development. This week's motif incorporates and develops two main ideas. One, 5 consecutive eighth notes, and secondly, rhythmic displacement. Let's review some of the common tools improvisers use to develop motifs. First of all, you've got your original motif, meaning take a melodic rhythm and add notes to it. Variation, same notes, different rhythm, or same rhythm, different notes. You can use extension, which means adding new material immediately before or after to either the original motif or a fragment of the original motif. Fragmentation, using a part of the motif. Rhythmic displacement, starting the motif on a different beat. Augmentation, making the time values longer. Diminution, making the time value shorter. Or developing a sequence, meaning the repetition of rhythm and or melody or melodic curve in your pattern. For an in-depth explanation of these ideas, check out Hal Crook's book, How to Improvise. Before I get to the line of the week, and so we're all on the same page, here are the chords to the progression. The chords are D minor 7 flat 5 to F minor 7 to G flat diminished to G minor 7 to C minor 7 to F7 to B flat major 7 to close it out. In addition to standard notation, tab, chords, and chord scales, I also include hammer-ons, pull-offs, left-hand fingering, and right-hand fingering. I include left-hand fingering, which I modified from Tim Miller's 2-1-2 approach. I include right-hand fingering in case you're interested in the fingerstyle approach I use. Here are the chord scales I'm using for this week's line. The chord scales I use don't have any non-harmonic tones, meaning they're made up of chord tones and allowable tensions. There often are, for any given chord, several different scales you can choose from that fit fine. In a nutshell, I go from chord sound to chord sound, resolving tension by half step at the point of chord change. But that's just how I do it, and there are many other types of vocabulary you may prefer. It's also important to add plenty of space. This is what Hal Crook calls the play-rest approach. The chord scales are F melodic minor to E flat major to G flat whole half to B flat pentatonic to B flat major to G flat melodic minor to F pentatonic to close it out. Here's a basic idea of 5 consecutive eighth notes rhythmically displaced in such a manner that it starts an eighth note rest later each time on a given measure. Easier to demonstrate it than to describe it. Here's the line of the week with Guitar Pro backing I use to make sure I'm getting the notes in the rhythm accurate. Let's look specifically at the line of the week. In measure 1, you've got your original motif, meaning 5 consecutive eighth notes, starting on beat 1. In measure 2, there's a variation of the original motif, again starting on beat 1. In measures 3 to 4, there's a variation starting on beat 2. In measures 5 to 6, there's a variation starting on the and of beat 2. In measures 6 to 7, there's a variation starting on beat 3. In measures 7 to 8, there's a variation starting on the and of beat 3. And then finally in measure 9, there's a variation consisting of a quintuplet, which is a type of diminution mentioned earlier where the time values for each note have been shortened. In this week's line, you could take any one of these measures and develop it by creating sequences. For example, you could take the idea of a quintuplet and repeat it, Or you could take the variation in measures 5 to 6, containing an interesting intervallic leap, and make a repeating sequence out of that. Also, a word about resolving tension. Take a look at the last note of measure 3 going into measure 4. Note A flat under the G flat diminished chord resolves by half step to note G under the G minor 7 chord. That's because at the point of chord change, you only leap from a note if it's agreeable, meaning harmonic, to both the chord of the moment and the next chord. Otherwise, you need to resolve the note, preferably by half step. There's the same situation at the end of measure 6 going into the beginning of measure 7. The note G flat under the F7 chord resolves by half step to note G under the B flat major 7 chord. So that's all for this week. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next week.